Hi, I'm Daren Swanson, and this video is intended for explosives experts, chemists, and engineers regarding a continuation patent application I filed in the United States for a detonatable explosive consisting of combinations of dry ice and powdered metals like magnesium and aluminum.
3, 2, 1.
Now, I've already had a patent granted in the US for a method to produce diamond by detonating combinations of dry ice with powdered metals. However, in the US, they view that as a separate invention and they require a separate application altogether, and that's what the continuation patent is for. Unfortunately, the continuation has been rejected over and over again based on the examiner's opinion that there's nothing novel about the idea of combining dry ice with powdered metals to make an explosive. To her, she figures that it's an obvious intuitive step that any explosives expert or any person skilled at all in the field of explosives could easily come up with, even though historically there's no record of anyone having conducted any research with detonating dry ice and powdered metals before the filing of my application. The examiner's logic is based on her perception that an explosives expert would draw certain conclusions about the combustibility of powdered metals in a carbon dioxide atmosphere, which can produce a dust explosion when initiated by a spark or flame, versus a detonatable combination of solid CO2 and powdered metals, which is not sensitive to the initiation of a spark or a flame, very difficult to ignite and will likely fizzle out, but requires a shockwave to initiate a self-sustaining reaction of some kind. In reality, those two systems are completely different from one another, from how they appear physically to what's necessary to initiate a reaction, and right up to the mechanics of whatever the reaction is that's taking place, because combustion mechanics in a dust explosion are completely different from what happens during a detonation. But unfortunately for me, the examiner doesn't appear to have the necessary training or background to enable her to distinguish between these two systems properly, and it leads her to concluding incorrectly that there's no novelty and therefore the patent shouldn't be granted. So my goal is to collect declarations from qualified experts to submit with my next response. I need experts to explain to the examiner that my invention is in fact novel and there's nothing obvious about it, and that there's a difference between combustion versus detonation. They're not the same thing. And I also need an explanation regarding how explosives like emulsions and water gels are sensitized with glass microballoons or bubbles of air. Let me explain. In the rejection, the examiner cites a patent from the 1970s for water gel explosive formulations, and in that patent, the author comments that gases such as air, nitrogen, or carbon dioxide can be bubbled into the explosive. The author doesn't explain the purpose for adding gas, but as someone who's worked in an explosives manufacturing facility and has received a lot of training regarding how explosives work, how to sensitize them, shoot them, compare them, evaluate them, etc., I know why gas bubbles are added. It's to increase the sensitivity of the explosive. And that's achieved by creating void spaces with those bubbles of gas. And when the shock wave is traveling through the explosive, those little void spaces collapse, creating a pocket of intense heat, which contributes to the detonation mechanics, causing an overall effect of that explosive exhibiting an increased sensitivity. It can be shot now with a detonator versus maybe a booster if it wasn't sensitized. That's what that is for, to increase sensitivity. But unfortunately, because the examiner doesn't understand that concept, and because she also read from that patent that carbon dioxide is one of the gases that can be used, and since carbon dioxide in the solid state is dry ice, which is in my patent, and since those water gel explosives use powdered aluminum, which is also covered in my patent, the examiner has deduced, unfortunately, that she believes that an explosives expert could very easily, although it's never been done, could very easily have thought to think that by adding more carbon dioxide to react with the aluminum in the mixture, that they would eventually get to a point where they would think, oh, I know, we can't add any more carbon dioxide gas. We need to now start adding dry ice. And so she figures that with enough iterative testing, an explosives expert would come to the conclusion that there's some optimal amount of dry ice that can be added to a water gel explosive to make it more sensitive than it would have been if you would have left it alone, which, let's face it, it would have been more sensitive if you left it alone. But anyway, in reality, the act of adding dry ice to a water gel explosive to increase its sensitivity is not something I believe an explosives expert would ever think to do for the end in mind of increasing sensitivity. Because, in my opinion, the decrease in temperature would make this explosive shoot at a lower velocity, and it would probably require more initiation, which would make it, in my opinion, less sensitive, and therefore her whole argument is counterintuitive to what she's presenting as a reason to reject my application. Regardless, that's still her position, and I need experts to help her see what an expert would actually be thinking and concluding based on those very same things. So I need expert opinions that the U.S. Patent Office will respect, captured in the form of legal declarations which have a specific format that must be followed. If you are interested in helping, I'll provide you with a template to follow with suggested wording and outlining the topics that need to be addressed. I'll make it super simple. So if you think you have the right experience and qualifications to help me with what I've presented here today, I would really like to hear from you. Please reach out, message me, and I'll take it from there. Thanks for listening.